Gurmaigad cean cóirle agus in éadógar an rialtas go raibh go a chóirt faoisiú céine do daoine is saibhre sa tír seo, ní seo na mílte daoine a coppla daoine an na daoine atá pension acu, ciste pension do €1 billion cheanna hen agus go bhfuil siad go a chóirt faoisiú céine do 350 million euro don na daoine seo. Go bhfuil siad a geirí ar an stát gré chéine gurí na tíre seo, codú le na daoine seo ciste pension a bheith acu sus go dtí €2.8 million. Can Corley, yesterday the Minister for Finance, Jack Chambers, announced that he was going to give a massive tax break that will only benefit the wealthiest members of our society. That's those in receipt of gold-plated pensions. This is in fact the only tax measure that Minister Chambers has announced in advance of Budget 2025, and I think that speaks volumes of this government's priorities, that their decision is, and the priority is, to make sure that they look after those who have massive gold-plated pensions. When I asked Minister Chambers when he came before the budgetary oversight how much is this going to cost ordinary taxpayers, the measure that he announced today, he didn't have a clue. He didn't know how much it would cost, but we do know that it is estimated to be in the hundreds of millions of euros. And those in receipt of gold-plated pensions are already well catered for in this state, courtesy of ordinary workers and families. They can build up pension pots of up to €2 million, and for every €1 that they put in, the taxpayer gives them 40 cents back. This allows them to retire, currently on the age of 65, on pensions of €70,000 and a tax-free lump sum of €200,000. Now, most people could only dream of pensions of this scale. Indeed, most workers are only paid a fraction of this, never mind even talking about their pensions in retirement. But this government wants to go one further for those at the top. Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael want the taxpayer to fund these gold-plated pensions until they reach €2.8 million in size. Madness. Asking those who work in Tesco's or nurses or guards or firefighters or teachers to help build up the pension pots of those at the very top to the tune of €2.8 million so they can retire with a state-supported pension of €100,000 per year is madness. And these are gold-plated pensions because it is only the select few that could afford to put this amount of money into their pension pots, even if the taxpayer is contributing 40% to that fund. This is a massive tax break that has been announced only for the wealthiest individuals with pensions already over €2 million. And how much of a tax break? How much of a tax break is the government planning to give these individuals? A massive €320,000. Yes, that's right, Concordia. €320,000 is what an individual will benefit as a result of the decision of this government yesterday. It is crazy. And these are only people, not ordinary people, not the people I mentioned that are working hard in their shop floors. These are people with pension pots already of €2 million that have a pension entitlement of over €70,000. Meanwhile, those on the state pension languish and are left with crumbs off the table. And this is the wrong choice that the government's making at any time, but definitely the wrong time when we're dealing with a crisis in terms of cost of living and workers and families are struggling. And I'm not surprised at Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael because we always know where their priorities are at. So how many people are captured by this? 254 people last year had a pension pot above €2 million because the average pension pot in the state is about €111,000. People could only dream of €2 million, but these guys across here think that that's not good enough. That's why they're asking ordinary people to help build up the pension of the elites till they get to €2.8 million, giving them a €320,000 tax reduction. So can I ask you, Minister, what do you say to the taxpayer who's struggling to pay the bills now? Why do you ask them to contribute? Because that's what they're doing, 40% to pension pots for the elite that reaches €2.8 million.
Yes, just to try to bring a bit of reality to this conversation here now. You'll know, Deputy, that the previous Minister for Finance appointed Dr. Donald de Butler to undertake an independent examination of the standard fund threshold, which was reduced back in 2014, as you know. Our main focus as a government has been in relation to pensions, particularly for middle-income workers is to actually ensure that they have pension provision, and that we've good state pension provision as well. Since this government came into office, the weekly state pension has increased by €29 per week, and we're focusing very, very closely on our budget negotiations of ensuring that those in the state pension receive the increases that they deserve. The work that we've done as a government as well in the non-contributory old age pension as well is very, very significant. I would contrast that to your own proposals as a party in relation to average workers who are making provision in the private sector for their pensions, or indeed public sector workers who are paying into AVCs, that you and your party have proposed year on year to reduce the pension tax relief to the standard rate, which would take the legs from under your average nurse and your average, you've proposed, you have absolutely, to reduce it to 20%, which would actually reduce the pension tax relief that they receive. Now, what government have decided upon, the Minister for Finance considered the de Butler report, which was done independently, carefully, taking into account the recommendations of the report. And if you've seen the report yourself, Deputy, you see that we haven't in any way, shape or form accepted all of those recommendations. But what the government have agreed to is to implement a staggered approach to changes in the standard fund threshold, with some changes to be legislated for this year. But no changes to this will take effect till 2026. And that is a phased change on the standard fund threshold to provide a phased increase from 2026 of €200,000 per year to 2029. Previously, and you'll remember this, Deputy, from your time here, that the standard funding threshold was up to 5 million and was reduced. But our focus has always been for average workers and those who are there to assist them in making pension provision themselves, okay, firstly, and then secondly is to make sure that we have a continued increase in the state pension, and which this government have always made a priority, and we will make a priority in this budget again. As I said, €29 per week increases since this government have come in on the standard state pension as well. We do need to see increase in pension provision and in pension take-up for workers as well. That's why things like auto-enrolment are very, very important too, which I can't assume you'll support it. If it's a government proposal, you'll probably reject it. But what you're trying to do here is to create an impression that government are looking after a small cohort of people and not anyone else. That's not the case at all. This is an independent report that government are acting on in a very structured way, in a phased way as well. And no changes will take place next year, as you know, and there will be a phased approach to increasing the standard funding threshold from 2026 onwards. That's actually what's happening. But our main focus in relation to pensions and pension provision is to ensure that workers in this country, in a country that has full employment, I might add, because of the economic policies of this government and the hard work of our people, that we've 2.75 million people now working in this country near full employment. And I think when they look across at the opposition benches, they would see how that economic prosperity, that we still have challenges in this country, how that will be put at risk. At risk if you were Minister for Finance, because there is not a bandwagon that you won't jump on, Deputy. There is not one that you won't jump on, and you bend in the wind on any issue. That's not the way you run a country, that's not the way you run an economy.
First of all, the Minister is talking rubbish, and I challenge you to produce an alternative budget to back up what you said about standardisation, because it is complete mistruths, and you know it. Because you cannot defend this. You cannot defend this. I asked you a simple question. Why should we be asking the workers of Tesco or the hairdressers or the workers in the shop floor to actually help contribute to a pension pot of €2.8 million for the most wealthiest in Irish society? That will entitle them to a state-supported pension of €100,000. It will entitle them to a tax cut of €320,000. That is what you have announced yesterday. And why are you asking ordinary people to do it? Why do you think the state should help people build up pensions to that level? You are right. The pension pot used to be €5.4 million. It was the last time you were in government, right before you wrecked the economy and brought the IMF to our shore. It was madness then. It is madness now. We should not go back. So answer the question. Why should ordinary workers help contribute to the pensions of the most elite in Irish society? Because ordinary people don't have a whiff of pensions of 70,000, 80,000, 90,000, 100,000. Why do you believe that they should contribute to this? And why should this tax break of €320,000 go to people who already have pension pots above €2 million?
It's nothing of the sort, and you know that. I don't know whether this is a matter you discussed when you went to London to meet potential investors in this country recently as well, whether pensions was a matter that you actually discussed with them at the time. What this is about is acting on an independent report that's come forward. And in a very phased way from 2026 is to increase the standard funding threshold. Whilst we're doing that, this government have been reforming the pension arrangements in this country as well, bringing forward auto-enrolment for workers, which is really important. No, it's not crumbs. Excuse me. About 50% of people in this country have made pension provision themselves. That's it. We have about 50% who don't have any pension provision. That is our absolute focus. That's why we need to keep things like that one can claim tax relief at your marginal rate, not like the Sinn Féin proposal that any average worker out there who is earning will actually be paying more in tax, because you have proposed before, Deputy, and I'll send you the documentation, Sinn Féin, that we would reduce the pension tax relief to the standard rate, and you've done that, and that's a real cost to workers and a real cost to people.
Ryan, my simple question today: how can you say your Housing for All policy is working when over 4,000 children are homeless? Everyone deserves the dignity of a roof over their head, and that basic responsibility of the state to provide shelter, to provide homes, is even more pressing when it comes to children and young people. On the very formation of the first Dáil, the first document produced was the first democratic programme for the new republic. And Labour's significant contribution to that delivered the strong commitment that the first duty of the Republic would be the welfare of all its children, a principle as resonant today as it was a century ago. And in the intervening years, of course, so much has changed and our economy has grown. But we cannot say that this is an equal republic for every child. Our republic has not discharged its vital duty to protect the welfare of our children. Minister, next Friday we will learn if yet more grim records have been broken when August's homelessness figures will be published. But already 4,401 children are in emergency accommodation in this state. And that heartbreaking figure is not indicative of a working housing policy. Indeed, it represents an increase of more than 70%, a shocking increase, over the 3 years since Housing for All was launched. 70% increase in child homelessness. And this is not just an empty statistic, because each child in homelessness is a child whose life has been blighted by the experience. A child doing their homework on the floor of a hotel room, a family hampered and humiliated by a failure that is a failure of government. No amount of glossy pamphlets or flashy press conferences from your government can obscure the reality that for those who seek a home, things are getting worse and not better. And on every key metric, your housing policy is failing. It's failing people of every generation. It's failing our children, clearly. But it's failing renters too, because you failed to incorporate the protections we proposed in our Renters' Rights Bill. It's failed because we see rent increases of 27% over the last 3 years, and it's failed because we see more than 23,000 eviction notices issued from Q2 of last year to the second quarter of this year alone. Minister, you're failing those who wish to buy a home. The average age of a first-time buyer is now 39, and the CSO has revealed that house prices have increased by almost 10% in the last year. That news coming on the same day as the central bank warning that you will miss your house building targets this year. Now, I know the Taoiseach assured us the central bank is wrong, but you've consistently missed targets on social housing, and the dogs on the street know the targets are too low anyway. And the Central Bank, the Housing Commission and so many more agree with us in Labour that new targets must be published of more than 50,000 new builds per year. We haven't seen those targets yet. And Minister, speculation about election dates is now rife. That speculation is going everywhere. We've seen your government colleagues all summer throwing around spending promises like confetti at a wedding. But, you know, we all know there is a very limited time left to this government. So I'm asking, in that limited time available to you, will you change tack on housing? Will you invest the Apple billions in delivering homes, introduce real protections for renters, and crucially, pass our Homeless Families Bill to protect children and keep children out of homelessness?
Thank you, Deputy Bacik, for your questions and your comments here today. Look, firstly, to do with those in emergency accommodation and homelessness, it remains the #1 challenge for this government, unquestionably. We are seeing in a number of counties across the country continued decreases in those accessing emergency accommodation and increasing exits. And if I take Q2 just gone, We had 630 households who were actually able to exit homeless emergency accommodation into safe and secure homes. The big focus for me and for this government is to continue the increase in social housing output. And last year, we delivered more new social homes than we've done in over 50 years. And we will hit our social housing target this year. And we've delivered over 6,000 this year. Affordable housing solutions we will deliver as well. When we came into government, there were no affordable housing solutions out there. There was no cost rental, secure tenancies for working people. We've nearly 2,000 tenancies in place through cost rental that we legislated for, that we funded, that's in place. And you will see the continued increase in house building and house delivery across the country, where in the last 12 months, we've had over 50,000 housing starts. In relation to the central bank projections, that's a matter for them. Central bank projections in the last couple of years were off. We know what the pipeline is. We have a pipeline of about 25,000 social homes alone, actually, either being built or in design and planning at this stage. So it remains the number one focus is to increase housing output, good public housing, good affordable housing for people, and yes, private housing as well. In relation to first-time buyers, we're seeing over 500 first-time buyers a week now purchasing their homes. That's the highest amount since 2006. And many of those first-time buyers are using the measures that we brought in, like the First Home Scheme, over 11,000 registrations, the First Home Bridge to Gap Scheme for first-time buyers, the Help to Buy grant, nearly 50,000 households have claimed that €30,000 of the tax you have paid back in your pocket to help with your deposit, and increasing all the time, and that will remain our focus. I can assure you, Deputy, and you've always been very constructive, to be fair to yourself and your party colleagues with regard to the debate on housing, it is still a challenge, unquestionably. And the single biggest focus I have and this government have is continuing to exit people from emergency accommodation to safe and secure housing. Now, homelessness, as you know, and I know because I chair the National Homeless Action Committee myself, is a complex issue. And people enter into emergency accommodation for a myriad of reasons, and it can be notice to quit, it can be family breakup, it can be a number of reasons. You'll see that we publish that data very openly and very transparently every single month, as we'll do on the last Friday of this month again. What I'm optimistic about is the number of exits are increasing substantially, and indeed the preventions. We had nearly 1,000 households prevented from entering emergency accommodation in Q2 of this year, because of measures like the new build homes, but also the purchase of homes with tenant in situ, which has been an unquestionable success and is continuing into this year.
But again, no matter how many figures you throw across the floor at me, on the key metrics, your housing policy is failing. Rents are up, house prices are up, and homelessness is up. And I know you say that it's the number one challenge, is ensuring that people can exit from homelessness. But the number of exits is simply not keeping up with the number of entries into homelessness. I gave you the figure. 23,000 notices to quit in the 12 months between the second quarter of last year and this year. That's the primary cause of people entering homelessness, is because they can't find a home. They've been evicted, they cannot find a home that is affordable to rent or to buy. And I'm asking again, Minister, what change in TAC will you make in the limited time left to you and your government to ensure that we see a change, that we don't see this awful increase in homelessness at the end of every month? And I know you publish the figures. You're well aware of the rising numbers of children in homelessness. Of course you are. But what are you going to do about it in the next few months? I'm offering you a constructive proposal. Our Homeless Families Bill, which is backed by NGOs in the sector, is backed by those who are working on the coalface with families in homelessness. Will you adopt our bill? You supported it previously from opposition. Will you adopt it now and try and have some change to help and support children in homelessness?
Ensure that where people end up in a situation where they don't have a home, that they're supported in the best possible accommodation that can be provided for them for as short a time as possible. And that's why the government support this year to the tune of 242 million for homeless and emergency services, and we'll be adding a supplementary to that this year. And I've always given a commitment to the NGOs in that sector that whatever funding is needed will be given. If you listen to Focus Ireland last week as well, where they've acknowledged as well that they are optimistic from their perspective, that they're optimistic about the number of exits because of the increase in social housing output. Like, we've delivered 116,000 new homes since this government came into office. from a very low base, I might add. I think by most fair assessment, people would see that as progress. But yes, significant challenges do exist, certainly exist. And my main focus is continuing the housing output, which I believe this year will be in the high 30,000s to 40,000, which would be a significant step up. And that made up by €5 billion of investment that we're making as a government on behalf of our citizens in housing, the most significant investment that has been made ever in the history of the state. But we are dealing with a situation of very significant under-delivery over a 10-year period, catching up on that pent-up demand there. But homelessness and exiting people remains my #1 focus, and this government's #1 focus.
Despite your claims of success and the promises and commitments, while the Dáil was in recess, the human misery that is resulting from the housing and homelessness crisis continued and escalated. And with the Housing Commission and now the Central Bank telling us that your plan, Housing for All, is about half of what is actually necessary to deal with the deficit in housing, future needs, and particularly the deficit of social and affordable housing, the future is very, very grim. And I think it is important for us to focus on what that means for human beings. And I just want to tell you some of the cases that are coming across my desk just in the last week. Anthony is 67 years old. He has aggressive COPD, a heart condition, and he's been couch surfing and homeless since October of last year because he was evicted through no fault of his own. Gavin, somebody actually I've known since he was a teenager, is 62 years old. He's seeing a heart specialist, he's seeing a lung specialist, he has an open ulcer on his leg, he has been sleeping in his car, then he was sleeping in his tent, which was then recently stolen from him. And he is homeless with nowhere to go. Robert is 69 years old. He has heart disease, and he is going to be out of his home on the 21st of this month because his wife died and the family are selling the home and he has nowhere to go, and he was never on the housing list because he never thought he'd be in this situation. Linda is in her 50s. She is disabled, she has scoliosis, she has cardiac disease, she has had a pacemaker since she was, I think, 8 years old, couch surfing, and now separated from her son, because when you're couch surfing, it's difficult to find a place both for your and your child, so she's now separated from them. And then there's other people, like Sinead, who was 14 years on the housing list, and then lost all of her years because her son, who was at college, dropped out of college for a year, got a job, his income took the family household over the list, all her 14 years on the waiting list gone. Now left, and actually he's now back in college, back under the threshold, but all the years are gone. This is the sort of hopelessness people are facing. So I'm asking, what are you going to do different for these older people, vulnerable people, families, children who are in absolutely a dire state, and they're being told in most cases to go to hostels in the city centre, dormitory accommodation, nothing available in the locality, no prospect of a council house anytime soon, or even worse, knocked off the council list altogether with no prospect of being able to afford the private rents out there.
Just before calling the Minister to respond, can I ask members to join me in offering a céad míle fáilte, Crisa, to our counterparts from the Welsh Senate, led by Mr David Rees, Deputy Presiding Officer, the delegation, whom I was delighted to meet on my visit to the Senate in March, have a very busy programme of meetings with a number of Oireachtas committees. You're all heartily welcome, and we hope the visit proves beneficial. Now, Minister, please.
Curran fair fáilte freisin, and I hope you have a very successful and fruitful visit. Deputy Boyd-Barrett, we've discussed and debated both here in the House and in committee over the last 4 years the challenges that remain in housing. I haven't claimed success. You said that at the start. Absolutely not. What I've very clearly put down is where progress has been made. Last year, we built more new social homes than we've done in 50 years. In 50 years. And this year we will do more than that. This year we'll deliver, I don't know what Deputy Collins, have you got a problem? Yeah. Okay, well maybe you wait to ask a question. Let me answer Deputy Boyd-Barrett if that's okay. So, on affordable housing, when this government came into office, there were no affordable homes offered at all, Deputy Boyd-Barrett, you know that. Last year, 1,757 housing solutions on affordable housing. This year will be over 6,000. I'm not claiming success or that we've dealt with every challenge and every issue. Absolutely not. But unquestionably, to get to grips with what still remains a massive challenge on housing is to increase the supply that's there. Increase the supply in social, in affordable and in private homes. In your own constituency tomorrow, Shangana Castle, that Deputy Devlin knows very well and others, 597 homes being delivered on that site by the Land Development Agency that didn't have legislation when we came into government and had no capital. They delivered nearly 1,000 homes last year. They'll do more than that this year. And a flagship estate that's being built there. My own constituency of Dublin Fingal, Ballinamastone, 1,200 homes, 253 social, 253 affordable. I could give you loads of examples and you know them. Now, even though we're building all of those properties, we still have more to do there because there are people enter into homelessness and homeless emergency accommodation for a variety of reasons, as you have outlined there too. And we've got to make sure that we have a safety net for them and good quality emergency accommodation, that we can exit people out quicker. And we are doing that now. 630 households in Q2 alone exited into safe and secure homes. And that's why we've got to continue to increase the output, particularly of social housing. So our target this year we will attain as well. And we will attain and exceed the social housing target. As I speak to you here today, we've nearly 25,000 social housing units in the pipeline. And it is unprecedented. And even though Deputy Collins and others might disagree with that, it is simply a fact that we are delivering more social homes now than we've done in 50 years. Do we need to do more? Yes, yes, of course we do. And that's why we need a planning system as well that supports the delivery of the homes and the infrastructure that we need. That's why I expect deputies from all across the House to support the Planning and Development Bill when it comes back to the House here for final stages, so we can make sure that we've an efficient planning system where you can't have someone from Ballina objecting to a social housing development in Bray, where you can't have people blocking housing for people, delaying housing, where planning decisions being made in courts. This affects people. This delays housing delivery, and we're determined as a government to fix that planning system as well, and I look forward to receiving the support of all deputies opposite when this bill comes to the House at final stages at the start of October.
Campaigning on the Shangana site, which are going to open tomorrow, for 18 years. 18 years it's taken us to develop a public site to deliver 600 social and affordable houses. At that rate, we're facing a very, very grim and long housing crisis. By the way, we still don't know what price the affordable housing on that is going to be. There's going to be 200 social houses. There are about 5,000 families on the housing list in our area waiting 15 to 20 years. And many of the people in the cost rental bracket who've been thrown off the housing list because their income goes above it will not qualify for the cost rental on income grounds because their income isn't high enough and will be left high and dry. You didn't answer about the people I mentioned. Older, sick, vulnerable people. The only thing that's being offered to them when they live in Dún Laoghaire is to go to dormitory or hostel accommodation in Dublin city centre. And they won't go. They're terrified. They're too sick for that. And that's why they're sleeping in cars and couch surfing. They need something in their local area. And will you please do something about the thresholds? People 15, 16, 17 years on a list, and then it's gone.
Thank you, Deputy. Thank you. Minister,
Deputy, I was the first minister since 2011 to increase the social housing income limits. And we increased them all across the country, and they remain under review. Because we need to increase our own stock of social housing. And in the 4 years of this government, we have been able to do that and scale that up and scale up the capacity to deliver. Certainly, there is much more to do there. And I only used Shangana as an example. I could give you 20 more. You only have to drive around your own constituency or Dublin, anywhere across the 26 counties of the Republic, and see what developments are happening out there right now. And cost rental is making a difference, by the way, for lots of people. But I want to answer you specifically about seniors. It's a very good point that you've raised. There's a lot of people who are retired or on a state pension and that is a big focus in relation to ensuring that we have a right-sizing initiatives in place for people, but our local authorities are actually building homes for our seniors and our more vulnerable people as well. Another challenge is exiting people from HAP, unsecure tenancies. In the last 3 years, we've exited 14,000 people from housing assistance payments into permanent, safe, secure social homes. And we'll continue the purchase of homes with tenant in situ this year, which has been a success.
Now,
I'm happy if you give me the cases, I can have a look.
Míle mágat, Concordia. Minister, Leo Varadkar said that short of an asteroid hitting the planet, that the National Children's Hospital will be built for €700 million in 2020. Here we are, €2.2 billion, and it's still not built. €300 million has been spent on Metro North and not a shovel put in the ground. €22 million of ventilators were bought by the government during COVID. That didn't work, and it's costing 50 grand a year just to store them. 100 electric buses bought by Dublin Bus that didn't move an inch for a year and a half because somebody didn't put a planning application in for an electric charger. In the health service, 107,000 adverse incidents last year. It's 107,000 accidents that have damaged individuals. And we know that in 5 years, 3,140 people have lost their lives in the health service due to adverse incidents. The state has actually spent €2.5 billion in compensation as a result of those adverse incidents in the last 10 years. Nobody held to account. I actually asked a senior civil servant in front of the committee once, in his whole experience of the department and the HSE, did he ever know of somebody losing their job for an adverse incident, even up to the loss of life? And he said he'd never seen it in his time. And then we have the cybersecurity attack on the HSE, cost €100 million and will necessitate €650 million of security upgrades. In human cost, thousands of people have lost healthcare treatment, and as a result, people have suffered significantly in those terms. We know that there's 473 lawsuits now lining up because of the cyber attack, and the investigation that happened subsequently found out that the HSE was operating on a frail IT system that did not have the resources or the expertise. And actually, interestingly, the National Cyber Security Centre had a budget of €5 million the year the cyber attack happened. Now, to put that in context, the Taoiseach's office spent €15 million on press statements in the same year. In the same year, the Cyber Security Centre did not have a director and did not have a premises. Nobody ever held to account. In terms of cervical check, the government promised here in this chamber that no woman would ever have to go to court because of the damage done by cervical check. Yet we know that 400 women are currently going to court to achieve justice for what happened to them. And incredibly, 85% of the cervical samples are still being sent abroad for checking. Nobody held to account. Children going missing from Tusla, special emergency accommodation that is not properly regulated, some of those being exposed to sexual exploitation, nobody ever held to account. And I think that the Gucci bike shed that we see is a microcosm of the L'Oreal attitude of this government, that we are worth it. And again, what is going to be the accountability? Lessons will be learned and a report will be published just when everybody else has moved on. The question I'm asking for you is, when are we going to have individual responsibility? When will there be a cost for decisions that are made such as this that cost the country so much? Who signed off on the government bike shed and what rank were they within the OPW?
Thank you.
Thanks, Deputy. Look, you've raised a very important point with regard to accountability, also value for money. Thankfully, the state and its economy, due to the hard work of its people, have 2.75 million people working. We're running a budget surplus. We continue to do that. We're investing in very significant infrastructural projects, and we'll continue to move projects like Metro North that you've mentioned forward, which is a crucially important one for the East Coast region and Dublin in particular. Can I firstly say, Justin, I think Ceann Corla dealt with this yesterday about how we all feel about the example of really poor management and lack of accountability in relation to the now infamous bike shed on Marion Lawn. All of us abhor that, and it frustrates people and angers people. It angers me too. and certainly we need accountability. I served as 5 years as Vice Chairperson of the Public Accounts Committee. Saw the Public Accounts Committee do its job, and to see this Public Accounts Committee do its job of a function here of bringing people in and looking after and being the watchdog on expenditure. Every government department, its ministers and its Secretary-Generals have responsibilities in relation to the management of their budgets too. I cannot give you an answer directly in relation to that one particular example that you've raised as to who sanctioned it. I expect to hear that, and we should know that. And we should also know what process was followed and how in God's name someone thought to spend $336,000 on a bike rack would be something that would be permissible. No one in their right mind would actually think that. I take it as well, it's not just that one instance, it's an example of where people see their hard-earned tax that they've paid, that in certain instances where they believe it's been wasted, and I believe in this instance it has been. And we do need accountability, and I would say we've mechanisms within this House. We're all accountable as Teachta Dálaí, we're accountable to our constituents. And we go up for election every 4 or 5 years. The people will vote for us or they won't. And it's a democratic chamber and a democratic republic. But I do believe that within the structures of the civil service as well, where expenditure like this is made and decisions like that are made, that there has to be accountability. And there is accountability to the House. Count Corley's called for that. I would expect that the Public Accounts Committee would be involved and discuss that as well. The chairperson of the OPW, there should be no secret on this. People deserve to know. In relation to the provision of the Children's Hospital, it's a crucial piece of infrastructure for our children that will last for decades and decades and decades. There's no question that there's been a less than satisfactory history with regard to some of the expenditure within that, but we need that facility. And I think if you look back at how that was actually established in the first instance, how the contract was actually broken up, led to the problems there, that the groundwork's being done separately. That's my own belief. But we need that facility opened, and we need our kids to be looked after in a world-class facility, which it will be. But I support you in your call for accountability, and I don't think any deputy in this House would disagree with that.
Of examples. The Minister for Justice promised that there would be a policing review after the Dublin riots. It doesn't exist anymore. There's 4,000 empty local authority homes at the moment that take 8 months to be returned into the market. It takes 3 weeks for a private rental home to be returned to the market. The flood defences that were promised in Middleton in 2017, there still isn't even a planning application gone in relation to those. 20 million euros spent on pointless referendums where ministers blatantly misled the public. The M50 bridges were built for £53 million. Commuters are still paying billions of euros for those M50 bridges. The reality is, Minister, that the government is an accountability-free zone, and we are cursed to wake up to a Groundhog Day of incompetency unless there is change in relation to this. And accountancy means that there's a cost to an individual. No matter all the reports, all of the Public Accounts Committee, unless there's a cost to an individual for making decisions that are wrong or not fulfilling in their job contracts, this is going to happen over and over again. And I asked you, what does accountability look like to you? How will it be implemented? Because the reality is the buck stops with this government. And you're right, Minister. If we don't see accountability here, there will be accountability in the ballot box.
Thank you. Minister.
Just to say, Deputy, there's many advances in this country. I don't want your depiction that everything is wrong and everything is broken. It's not. Okay, let's be straight on that first. If we look at the vast improvement over decades with regard to infrastructure in this, with regard to infrastructure.
You have to admit that.
Okay, through the chair, I want to give you, and this is where you can assist in this, and all deputies have a responsibility on this. If we look at the delays in some of our largest infrastructural projects, what has been the reason for the delays in most of them? Planning. Objections, delays, judicial reviews, protests, all of those things. So what I would say to you, Deputy, is that you'll have an opportunity. You speak eloquently here about your frustration with delays and cost overruns. You'll have an opportunity within 2 to 3 weeks to either support, to vote for, or vote against the Planning and Development Bill, which will make a massive difference to the streamlining our planning system, which in many instances, not all, that cost overruns are caused by delays in planning, by objections, and that's something that we cannot continue to see. If we need to deliver, which we do, significant infrastructural projects, significant, like, as you've mentioned, Metro North and indeed others, that we need a planning system and planning legislation that underpins that. So I'll wait.
She's gone in Middleton.
That concludes.
Even not even an
That
application.
concludes leaders' questions.
Probably object to it.
We move now.